Hello and welcome to day 131 in the Not Alone Today Chronological Bible Reading Plan. Today we are in 1 Kings chapter 7 all the way to chapter 9 verse 14. And we are still in the New International Version for this week.
Chapter 7. It took Solomon 13 years, however, to complete the construction of his palace. He built the palace of the forest of Lebanon, 100 cubits long, 50 wide and 30 high, with 4 rows of cedar columns supporting trimmed cedar beams. It was roofed with cedar above the beams that rested on the columns, 45 beams, 15 to a row. Its windows were placed high in sets of 3, facing each other. All the doorways had rectangular frames. They were in the front part in sets of 3, facing each other.
He made a colonnade 50 cubits long and 30 wide. In front of it was a portico, and in front of that were pillars and an overhanging roof.
He built the throne hall, the hall of justice, where he was to judge, and covered it with cedar from floor to ceiling. And the palace in which he was to live, set farther back, was similar in design. Solomon also made a palace like this hall for Pharaoh's daughter, whom he had married.
All this structure from the outside of the great courtyard and from foundation to eaves were made of blocks of high-grade stone cut to size and smoothed on their inner and outer faces. The foundations were laid with large stones of good quality, some measuring 10 cubits and some 8. Above were high-grade stones cut to size and cedar beams. The great courtyard was surrounded by a wall of 3 courses of dressed stone and 1 course of trimmed cedar beams, as was the inner courtyard of the temple of the Lord, with its portico.
King Solomon sent to Tyre and brought Huram, whose mother was a widow from the tribe of Naphtali, and whose father was from Tyre, and a skilled craftsman in bronze. Huram was filled with wisdom, with understanding, and with knowledge to do all kinds of bronze work. He came to King Solomon and did all the work assigned to him.
He cast 2 bronze pillars, each 18 cubits high and 12 cubits in circumference. He also made 2 capitals of cast bronze to set on the tops of the pillars. Each capital was 5 cubits high. A network of interwoven chains adorned the capitals on top of the pillars, 7 for each capital. He made pomegranates in 2 rows, encircling each network to decorate the capitals on top of the pillars. He did the same for each capital. The capitals on top of the pillars in the portico were in the shape of lilies, 4 cubits high. On the capitals of both pillars, above the bowl-shaped parts next to the network, were the 200 pomegranates in rows all around. He erected the pillars at the portico of the temple. The pillar to the south he named Jachin, and the one to the north Boaz. The capitals on top were in the shape of lilies, and so the work on the pillars was completed.
He made the sea of cast metal circular in shape, measuring 10 cubits from rim to rim and 5 cubits high. It took a line of 30 cubits to measure around it. Below the rim, gourds encircled it, 10 to a cubit. The gourds were cast in 2 rows in one piece with the sea.
The sea stood on 12 bulls, 3 facing north, 3 facing west, 3 facing south, and 3 facing east. The sea rested on top of them, and their hind quarters were towards the center. It was a handbreadth in thickness, and its rim was like the rim of a cup, like a lily blossom. It held 2,000 baths.
He also made 10 movable stands of bronze. Each was 4 cubits long, 4 wide, and 3 high. This is how the stands were made. They had side panels attached to uprights. On the panels between the uprights were lions, bulls, and cherubim, and on the uprights as well. Above and below the lions and bulls were wreaths of hammered work. Each stand had 4 bronze wheels with bronze axles, and each had a basin resting on 4 supports, cast with wreaths on each side. On the inside of the stand, there was an opening that had a circular frame 1 cubit deep. The opening was round, and with its base work, it measured 1.5 cubits. Around its opening there was engraving. The panels of the stand were square, not round. The 4 wheels were under the panels, and the axles of the wheels were attached to the stand. The diameter of each wheel was 1.5 cubits. The wheels were made like chariot wheels. The axles, rims, spokes, and hub were all of cast metal.
Each stand had 4 handles, one on each corner projecting from the stand. At the top of the stand, there was a circular band 1/2 cubit deep. The supports and panels were attached to the top of the stand. The engraved cherubim, lions, and palm trees on the surfaces of the supports and on the panels in every available space, with wreaths all around. This is the way he made the 10 stands. They were all cast in the same molds and were identical in size and shape.
He then made 10 bronze basins, each holding 40 baths and measuring 4 cubits across, 1 basin to go on each of the 10 stands. He placed 5 of the stand on the south side of the temple and 5 on the north. He placed the sea on the south side and at the southeast corner of the temple. He also made the pots and shovels and sprinkling bowls.
So Hiram finished all the work he had undertaken for King Solomon in the temple of the Lord. The 2 pillars, the 2 bowl-shaped capitals on top of the pillars, the 2 sets of network decorating the 2 bowl-shaped capitals on top of the pillars, the 400 pomegranates for the 2 sets of network, 2 rows of pomegranates for each network decorating the bowl-shaped capitals on top of the pillars, the 10 stands with their basins, the sea and the 12 bowls under it, the pots, shovels, and sprinkling bowls.
All these objects that Hiram made for King Solomon for the temple of the Lord were of burnished bronze. The king had them cast in clay molds in the plain of the Jordan between Succoth and Zarethan. Solomon left all these things unweighed because there were so many. The weight of the bronze was not determined.
Solomon also made all the furnishings that were in the Lord's temple, the golden altar, the golden table on which was the bread of the presence, the lampstands of pure gold, 5 on the right and 5 on the left in front of the inner sanctuary, the gold floral work and lamps and tongues, the pure gold basins, wick trimmers, sprinkling bowls, dishes and censers, and the gold sockets for the doors of the innermost room, the most holy place, and also for the doors of the main hall of the temple.
When all the work King Solomon had done for the temple of the Lord was finished, he brought in the things his father had dedicated, the silver and gold and the furnishings, and he placed them in the treasuries of the Lord's temple.
Chapter 8. Then King Solomon summoned into his presence at Jerusalem the elders of Israel, all the heads of the tribes and the chiefs of the Israelite families, to bring up the ark of the Lord's covenant from Zion, the city of David. All the Israelites came together to King Solomon at the time of the festival in the month of Ethanim, the 7th month.
When all the elders of Israel had arrived, the priests took up the ark, and they brought up the ark of the Lord and the tent of meeting and all the sacred furnishings in it. The priests and the Levites carried them up, and King Solomon and the entire assembly of Israel that had gathered about him were before the ark, sacrificing so many sheep and cattle that they could not be recorded or counted.
The priests then brought the ark of the Lord's covenant to its place in the inner sanctuary of the temple, the most holy place, and put it beneath the wings of the cherubim. The cherubim spread their wings over the place of the ark and overshadowed the ark and its carrying poles. These poles were so long that their ends could be seen from the holy place in front of the inner sanctuary, but not from outside the holy place, and they are still there today. There was nothing in the ark except the 2 stone tablets that Moses had placed in it at Horeb, where the Lord made a covenant with the Israelites after they came out of Egypt.
When the priests withdrew from the holy place, the cloud filled the temple of the Lord, and the priests could not perform the service because of the clouds, for the glory of the Lord filled his temple.
Then Solomon said, "The Lord has said that he would dwell in a dark cloud. I have indeed built a magnificent temple for you, a place for you to dwell forever."
While the whole assembly of Israel was standing there, the king turned and blessed them. Then he said, "Praise be to the Lord, the God of Israel, who with his own hand has fulfilled what he promised with his own mouth to my father David. For he said, since the day I brought my people Israel out of Egypt, I have not chosen a city in any tribe of Israel to have a temple built, so that my name might be there, but I have chosen David to rule my people Israel."
My father David had it in his heart to build a temple for the name of the Lord, the God of Israel. But the Lord said to my father David, "You did well to have it in your heart to build a temple for my name. Nevertheless, you're not the one to build a temple, but your son, your own flesh and blood. He is the one who will build the temple for my name."
The Lord has kept the promise he made. I have succeeded David my father, and now I sit on the throne of Israel, just as the Lord promised. And I have built a temple for the name of the Lord, the God of Israel. I have provided a place there for the ark, in which is the covenant of the Lord that he made with our ancestors when he brought them out of Egypt.
Then Solomon stood before the altar of the Lord in front of the whole assembly of Israel, spread out his hands toward heaven, and said, "Lord, the God of Israel, there is no God like you in heaven above or on earth below. You who keep your covenant of love with your servants, who continue wholeheartedly in your way. You have kept your promise to your servant David, my father. With your mouth you have promised, and with your hand you have fulfilled it, as it is today.
Now, Lord, the God of Israel, keep for your servant David my father the promise you made to him when you said, 'You shall never fail to have a successor to sit before me on the throne of Israel, if only your descendants are careful in all they do to walk before me faithfully, as you have done. And now, God of Israel, let your word that you promised to your servant David my father come true.'"
But will God really dwell on earth? The heavens, even the highest heaven, cannot contain you. How much less this temple I have built? Yet give attention to your servant's prayer and his plea for mercy, Lord my God. Hear the cry and the prayer that your servant is praying in your presence this day. May your eyes be open toward this temple night and day, this place of which you said my name shall be there, so that you will hear the prayer your servant prays towards this place. Hear the supplication of your servant and of your people Israel when they pray towards this place. Hear from heaven your dwelling place, and when you hear, forgive.
When anyone wrongs their neighbor and is required to take an oath, and they come and swear the oath before your altar in this temple, then hear from heaven and act. Judge between your servants, condemning the guilty by bringing down on their heads what they have done, and vindicating the innocent by treating them in accordance with their innocence.
When your people Israel have been defeated by an enemy because they have sinned against you, and when they turn back to you and give praise to your name, praying and making supplication to you in this temple, then hear from heaven and forgive the sin of your people Israel, and bring them back to the land you gave to their ancestors.
When the heavens are shut up and there is no rain because your people have sinned against you, and when they pray towards this place and give praise to your name and turn from their sin because you have afflicted them, then hear from heaven and forgive the sin of your servant, your people Israel. Teach them the right way to live, and send rain on the land you gave your people for an inheritance.
When famine or plague comes to the land, or blight or mildew, locusts or grasshoppers, or when an enemy besieges them in any of their cities, whatever disaster or disease may come, and when a prayer or plea is made by anyone among your people Israel, being aware of the afflictions of their own hearts and spreading out their hands towards this temple, then hear from heaven your dwelling place. Forgive and act. Deal with everyone according to all they do, since you know their hearts, for you alone know every human heart, so that they will fear you all the time they live in the land you gave our ancestors.
As for the foreigners who does not belong to your people Israel, but has come from a distant land because of your name, for they will hear of your great name and your mighty hand and your outstretched arm, when they come and pray towards this temple, then hear from heaven your dwelling place. Do whatever the foreigner asks of you, so that all the peoples of the earth may know your name and fear you, as do your own people Israel, and may know that this house I have built bears your name.
When your people go to war against their enemies, wherever you send them, and when they pray to the Lord toward the city you have chosen and the temple I have built for your name, then hear from heaven their prayer and their plea and uphold their cause.
When they sin against you, for there's no one who does not sin, and you become angry with them and give them over to their enemies who take them captive to their own lands, far away or near, and if they have a change of heart in the land where they are held captive, and repent and plead with you in the land of their captors and say, we have sinned, we have done wrong, we have acted wickedly, and if they turn back to you with all their hearts and soul in the land of their enemies who took them captive, and pray to you toward the land you gave their ancestors, toward the city you have chosen, and the temple I have built for your name, then from heaven, your dwelling place, hear their prayer and their plea, and uphold their cause, and forgive your people who have sinned against you. Forgive all the offenses they have committed against you, and cause their captors to show them mercy, for they are your people and your inheritance, whom you brought out of Egypt, out of the iron smelting furnace.
May your eyes be open to your servant's plea and to the plea of your people Israel, and may you listen to them whenever they cry out to you. For you singled them out from all the nations of the world to be your own inheritance, just as you declared through your servant Moses when you, sovereign Lord, brought our ancestors out of Egypt.
When Solomon had finished all these prayers and supplications to the Lord, he rose from before the altar of the Lord, where he had been kneeling with his hands spread out toward heaven. He stood and blessed the whole assembly of Israel in a loud voice, saying,
Praise be to the Lord who has given rest to his people Israel, just as he promised. Not one word has failed of all the good promises he gave through his servant Moses. May the Lord our God be with us, as he was with our ancestors. May he never leave us nor forsake us. May he turn our hearts to him, to walk in obedience to him, and keep the commands, decrees, and laws he gave our ancestors. And may these words of mine, which I have prayed before the Lord, be near to the Lord our God day and night, that he may uphold the cause of his servants and the cause of his people Israel, according to each day's need, so that all the peoples of the earth may know that the Lord is God, and that there is no other. And may your hearts be fully committed to the Lord our God, to live by his decrees and obey his commands as at this time.
Then the king and all Israel with him offered sacrifices before the Lord. Solomon offered a sacrifice of fellowship offerings to the Lord, 22,000 cattle and 120,000 sheep and goats. So the king and all the Israelites dedicated the temple of the Lord.
On that same day, the king consecrated the middle part of the courtyard in front of the temple of the Lord. And there he offered burnt offerings, grain offerings, and the fat of the fellowship offerings, because the bronze altar that stood before the Lord was too small to hold the burnt offerings, the grain offerings, and the fat of the fellowship offerings.
So Solomon observed the festival at that time, and all Israel with him, a vast assembly, people from Lebo Hamath to the Wadi of Egypt. They celebrated it before the Lord our God for 7 days, and 7 more, 14 days in all. On the following day, he sent the people away. They blessed the king, and then went home, joyful and glad in hearts, for all the good things the Lord had done for his servant David and his people Israel.
Chapter 9, verse 1 to 14. When Solomon had finished building the temple of the Lord and the royal palace, and had achieved all he had desired to do, the Lord appeared to him a second time, as he had appeared to him at Gibeon. The Lord said to him, I have heard the prayer and plea you have made before me. I have consecrated this temple which you have built by putting my name there forever. My eyes and my heart will always be there.
As for you, if you walk before me faithfully with integrity of heart and uprightness, David your father did, and do all I command and observe my decrees and laws, I will establish your throne over Israel forever, as I promised David your father when I said, you shall never fail to have a successor on the throne of Israel.
But if you or your descendants turn away from me and do not observe the commands and decrees I have given you, and go off to serve other gods and worship them, Then I will cut off Israel from the land I have given them and will reject this temple I have consecrated for my name. Israel will then become a byword and an object of ridicule among all peoples. This temple will become a heap of rubble. All who pass by will be appalled and will scoff and say, "Why has the Lord done such a thing to this land and to this temple?" People will answer, "Because they have forsaken the Lord their God, who brought their ancestors out of Egypt, and have embraced other gods, worshipping and serving them. That is why the Lord brought all this disaster on them."
At the end of 20 years, during which Solomon built these two buildings, the temple of the Lord and the royal palace, King Solomon gave 20 towns in Galilee to Hiram, king of Tyre, because Hiram had supplied him with all the cedar and juniper and gold he wanted. But when Hiram went from Tyre to see the towns that Solomon had given him, he was not pleased with them. "What kinds of towns are these you have given me, my brother?" he asked. And he called them the land of Kabul, a name they have to this day. Now Hiram had sent to the king 120 talents of gold. This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God. Today we have read 2 chapters and half of the third, although it feels like many more because chapter 8 is quite long. But in chapter 7 we saw the final details for the building of Solomon's palace. Previously we have read of the details for the building of the temple, but chapter 7 tells us of the building of the palace. And then how Hiram, it was called Huram in the NIV, was invited to make bronze furnishings. This is different from the king Hiram that we had seen earlier on, that he contacted to supply the cedars and the logs that were used in the construction. And then we were given a list of everything inside the temple towards the end of that chapter. And then in chapter 8, Solomon brings the ark into the temple. And it was such a huge celebration and feasts when the priests brought the ark into the temple. And Solomon spoke to the people and then prayed a very beautiful prayer, well detailed out, at the dedication of the temple. And of course, the presence of God, signaled by such a huge and heavy cloud that was visibly present, so much so that the priest could not minister, graced the occasion. And then Solomon blessed the people and dedicated the temple. And in chapter 9, we're told that the Lord appears and gave a warning to Solomon. And we're told of some of the other things that Solomon did in the last few verses that we read. That covers what we've read for today. Let's go back to chapter 7. What stood out to you, my love, in chapter 7?
I was amazed that Solomon built the temple of God first before building a palace for himself. But what really, really struck me was the sea that stood on 12 bowls, holding 2,000 bats. If you would note from what we've read, there are lots of details about buildings and furnishings. And sometimes this can just pass over our heads because we can't picture it. We might not be able to picture it. So I went to search for resources that have put together a picture of what's been described. And I found that this sea looked like a round, big basin of water standing on the back of 12 brazen bowls. It's amazing. What about you?
Yeah, as you mentioned, he built the temple first, but it struck my attention from verse 1, especially because in the NIV there was this interesting word, however. It took Solomon 13 years, however, to complete the construction of his palace. As though to say, okay, the temple of God was built in 7, but to build his own palace took almost double that. But that's just perhaps not wishful thinking. I think there is something there there's a point there to hold on to in some sense. Of course, we know that he was tremendously wealthy, and while there was no blueprint handed over to him for a palace, he would go on to build something equally magnificent that people would eventually come from the ends of the earth to pay him visits just to see all of these things, as Queen Sheba would do, and we'll see that as we continue in the story. But yeah, that's the major thing that stood out to me in chapter 7. Chapter 8, what stood out to you?
10 to 11 stood out to me on how the temple was filled with the glory of God, so much that the priests could not perform the service. And also Solomon's prayer of dedication. Oh, wow. That was quite detailed.
Mm-hmm.
He portrays, there's something to be learned from his prayer. It was not a leader. It's not a leader that shies away from the possibility of his flock or even he himself falling. But he weaved any fallibility into his prayer, that God, no matter what is done, because this temple has been done in your name. Hear us, forgive us, save us. Let our enemies show us mercy. And I found that so deeply impactful. What about you?
Yeah, for me, there is a repeated refrain between verses 15 and verse 24. Both of them have something of the sort of this phrase. It says in verse 15, God of Israel, who with his own hand has fulfilled what he promised with his own mouth. And then in verse 24, you have kept your promise to your servant David, my father. With your mouth you have promised, and with your hand you have fulfilled it. As though to remind us that, when God promises, he does it by his own hand, by his own strength. We don't help him to accomplish his plans and purposes. He's God like that. Mama Sarah tried in her own way to bring some Hagar into the picture, to help God to fulfill what God has promised Abraham. We know how that ended. But when God makes a promise with his own mouth, he fulfills it with his own hand. But the other thing that stood out to me and that I really found, wow, like I thought there was no reason why Solomon should even have included this in his prayer, was the part of praying for foreigners, for immigrants in their midst. Verse 41 to 43. As for the foreigner who does not belong to your people Israel, this temple is not for them. So there is no reason for him to even think of foreigners while praying. But again, this is part of the wisdom of God finding expression. As for the foreigner who does not belong to your people, but who have come from a distant land because of your name, they will hear of your great name and your mighty hand and your outstretched arm. And then when they come and pray towards this temple, hear from heaven, your dwelling place. Do what the foreigner asks of you, so that all the peoples of the earth may know your name and fear you. And I think this was really at the heart of God, because eventually we know that all of this singling out Israel as an inheritance and dealing with them the way he has dealt with them in history up until this point and going forward is as a foreshadow of what will eventually happen when Christ comes and actually brings up a new body that would involve anyone and everyone who believe. And so the end goal is not just for the Israelites to continue to be these special people of God, but so that through them and God's dealing with them, all nations from everywhere and anywhere can come to know the Lord. And Solomon already anticipated that and included it in his prayer. I was like, wow. Yeah. Chapter 9, what stood out to you, my love?
13 to 14. I found it very curious that Solomon would give Hiram towns. That is not in the blueprint.
Working with Hiram was also not in the blueprint.
No, but David did allude to it, that there will be people who would volunteer to help him. So Solomon took the initiative, I suppose, based on that. But they're now offering him towns in Galilee, 20 towns. So that means Hiram would then come with his own gods to come live there. And I thought that was a bit too much.
Indeed.
Yes, you gave me your workers. Yes, you brought cedars through the Mediterranean Sea. And I've thanked you with olive oil. You said the only thing Hiram asked for was for him to send food for his royal household. And Solomon did. Gave him wheat and pressed olive oil. But giving him 20 towns?
Yeah.
Maybe he was trying to build alliance with the king of Tyre.
No, they've already made a treaty as of this point, so it's not. And the response of Hiram to the
Which is
gift is
interesting.
even more interesting. Like, what's all this? Like,
But we don't even know what was wrong with the towns they gave.
perhaps, I mean, on the flip side, maybe there is a deeper message here that we see continuing to play out in what some will call neo-colonization or neo-colonialism. We know that the era of colonization has ended in some sense, but the empires of this world still continue to lay claims in various ways to the people that they have helped. Because yes, take Hiram out of the picture with all of the cedars of Lebanon, there is no temple and there is no Solomon's palace. So given the extent to which Hiram had contributed to what everybody can visibly see as Solomon's temple and Solomon's palace, perhaps they thought, I desire much more than this. I mean, it was Hiram's what's the word, jurisdiction and discretion to say, okay, in fact, not only am I going to supply you cedars, I'm going to do it this way. We're going to cut these, we're going to ferry them across as rafts to you, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. So he was invested in the project, and perhaps he thought he deserved much more than just some 20 towns in the region of Galilee. And so he calls it Kabul, and apparently Kabul in the Hebrew is a word that sounds like worthless, or literally means as good as nothing, like worthless. In the Hebrew is what Kabul means. So yeah, but interesting thoughts, and we flip the page on day 132 and then we'll see how the story unfolds. But till then, just remember,
You're not alone
today.
God bless you.